My beloved child, pause here for a moment. Do not move past these words as though they found you by accident, because something has been waiting for the precise moment when your heart would become quiet enough to hear it. What you are about to receive is not a warning meant to frighten you. It is a revelation meant to reach the place inside you that has been asking questions in silence. There is someone connected to your heart who has carried an unspoken truth for longer than you realize, and now the weight of keeping it hidden has become heavier than the fear of finally saying it. You have felt the shift, have you not? Something has been different in the atmosphere around this connection. Even when no message arrived, even when no explanation was offered, even when everything appeared still on the surface, a deeper movement was taking place. You sensed it in unexpected moments. A memory would rise without invitation. Their name would pass through your thoughts when you were focused on something else. A feeling would enter your chest so suddenly that you could not explain where it came from. You wondered whether you were imagining it, but your spirit was noticing what your eyes could not yet see. The person your heart recognizes has been standing at the edge of a decision. They have almost spoken several times. They have imagined the conversation, rehearsed the first sentence, changed it, abandoned it, and then returned to it when the night became too quiet. They have held their phone and stared at the space where your name appears. They have written words and erased them, not because they had nothing to say, but because what they needed to say felt too important to place inside an ordinary message. There are confessions that can be offered casually, and there are confessions that divide life into before and after. This is the second kind. Stay with these words, because the deepest part has not yet been revealed. They are not only trying to tell you how they feel. Their heart has been carrying something about the past, something about the silence between you, and something about a choice they made when fear was louder than love. They know you may have misunderstood their distance. They know their hesitation may have looked like indifference. They know there were moments when you questioned whether the connection mattered to them at all. What you could not see was the battle happening behind their silence. They wanted to appear strong. They wanted to convince themselves that time would make the feeling smaller. They tried to become busy enough to outrun the truth. They placed responsibilities, conversations, distractions, and even other people between themselves and the emotions they did not know how to manage. For a while, they believed this strategy was working. They could pass through the day without speaking your name. They could smile when others were watching. They could pretend the ache was only temporary. But the heart does not forget simply because the mouth remains silent. At first, the truth returned in small ways. A familiar song. A place that reminded them of something you once said. A certain expression on another person's face that carried a trace of you but never the same warmth. Then the reminders became stronger. They began comparing every meaningful conversation to the way you understood what they could not explain. They noticed how rare it was to feel seen without performing. They recognized that what existed between you had touched a part of them that ordinary connections never reached. This recognition did not bring immediate peace. It frightened them. You must understand this, beloved child. Sometimes people run from the very thing they have prayed to find because receiving it requires them to become honest. Love does not only offer comfort. Real love reveals the places where fear has been hiding. It exposes the wounds behind pride, the insecurity behind silence, and the longing behind every attempt to appear unaffected. Your presence awakened something in this person that they could no longer control, and because they did not know how to surrender, they stepped backward. You thought their distance meant they felt less. In truth, they created distance because they were feeling more than they knew how to carry. But something has happened recently. A moment came that disturbed the story they had been telling themselves. It may have looked ordinary to everyone else, but to them it was impossible to ignore. Someone asked a question about you. Perhaps your name was mentioned unexpectedly. Perhaps they saw something that reminded them of the possibility of losing their chance. Perhaps they heard that you were healing, changing, or preparing to move forward without them. Whatever form it took, the message reached the exact place they had been protecting. For one breathless moment, they saw a future in which you no longer waited for clarity. They imagined you becoming peaceful without their explanation. They imagined someone else recognizing your value without hesitation. They imagined the door between you closing, not with anger, but with acceptance. And that possibility shook them more deeply than they expected. It forced them to confront a truth they had delayed for too long: silence is also a decision, and every day they remained quiet was teaching you how to live without them. That realization has changed something. They are no longer asking only, "What happens if I speak?" Now they are asking, "What happens if I never do?" The second question is the one that has kept them awake. There is a sentence they wish they had said earlier. It is simple, but it carries the weight of every hidden feeling. You mattered to me even when I acted as though you did not. They want you to know that their behavior was not always an accurate reflection of their heart. They want to explain that the cold moments were not created by a lack of care, but by a lack of courage. They want to tell you that certain words they withheld were present within them all along. Yet there is more. They also carry regret over a moment when you needed reassurance and they gave you uncertainty. They remember more than you think. They remember the pause in your voice. They remember the way you tried to appear unaffected. They remember a question you asked, perhaps indirectly, hoping they would finally speak honestly. Instead, they protected themselves. They offered an incomplete answer, changed the subject, withdrew, or behaved as though the moment was not important. It was important. They replayed it later. They heard the truth beneath your words after it was too late to respond in the way you deserved. They realized you were not demanding perfection. You were asking for honesty. You were not trying to trap them. You were trying to understand whether it was safe to keep your heart open. But because they were still fighting themselves, they left you with uncertainty. And uncertainty, when it lasts too long, can become its own kind of heartbreak. Heaven saw the moment you stopped asking. Heaven saw when you began carrying the questions alone. Heaven saw you trying to make peace with an ending that had never been clearly spoken. You told yourself to release what you could not control. You tried to be mature, patient, and understanding. But beneath that strength was a quieter sorrow. You did not need a perfect outcome, you needed the truth. That truth is now pressing against the walls of their silence. Do not skip what comes next, because there is a reason this message reached you before their words did. Your heart must be prepared not only for what they feel, but for the complexity of what they may reveal. The conversation they are imagining is not a flawless declaration. It is an honest one. They know that saying, "I cared," does not erase the moments when they failed to show it. They know an apology does not automatically restore trust. They know your heart may need time, proof, and consistency. For the first time, they are beginning to understand that love cannot survive only as a hidden feeling. It must eventually become a visible choice. This person has spent too long believing that strong emotion was enough. They thought that because they felt deeply, the connection would somehow remain untouched by silence. They believed you would sense what they could not say and continue to hold the door open. But now they see the unfairness of expecting you to interpret what they refuse to communicate. Their awakening is not only emotional. It is becoming responsible. And that is why the message they want to give you is changing. At first, they only wanted to tell you, "I miss you." Then they realized those words were too small. Missing you was not the whole truth. They missed the person they were when they felt understood by you. They missed the ease beneath your conversations. They missed the invisible familiarity that made even ordinary moments feel meaningful. They missed knowing that somewhere in the world existed a person who could recognize their silence without being deceived by it. Then they wanted to say, "I still care." But even that felt incomplete. Care can remain passive. Care can hide behind fear. Care can watch from a distance while the other person is left to wonder. What they truly want to say is more difficult. "I have been afraid to become the person this connection requires me to be." That confession is closer to the center. Your soulmate has not only been afraid of losing you. They have been afraid that receiving your love would require them to release old identities. They would have to stop pretending they need no one. They would have to admit that previous wounds still influence their choices. They would have to become vulnerable without controlling the outcome. They would have to risk being seen completely. You saw more than they intended to reveal. Even when they were careful, you noticed the tenderness behind their defenses. You heard the uncertainty beneath their confident words. You recognized the sadness they disguised as independence. That is part of what drew them toward you, but it is also part of what caused them to retreat. Being understood can feel like home, but to someone accustomed to hiding, home can also feel terrifying. Still, something within them has grown tired of running. The soul does not find peace through endless avoidance. Eventually, every hidden truth asks to be spoken. Every unfinished connection asks for clarity. Every heart that has been divided between longing and fear reaches a point where it must choose which voice will lead. They are nearing that point now. There is a private conversation they recently had with someone they trust. This person may be a friend, a relative, or someone who has quietly observed the changes in them. The conversation began with another subject, but your name entered it. At first, they tried to answer casually. They reduced the connection to something smaller than it was. They said they were fine. They acted as though the past had settled. But the person listening was not convinced. They asked a direct question, then why does your entire energy change when you speak about them? Your soulmate had no immediate answer. Silence filled the space. And in that silence, their carefully constructed explanations began to fall apart. The person beside them did not accuse them. They simply reflected what had been visible for a long time. They pointed out how often your soulmate returned to memories of you, how quickly they defended you when your name was misunderstood, and how every attempt to move forward seemed to lead them back to the same unresolved feeling. Then came the sentence that pierced them. You are waiting for the perfect moment, but the perfect moment may become the moment you missed. Those words have followed them ever since. They did not admit everything during that conversation. Not yet. But later, when they were alone, they finally allowed themselves to feel what they had been avoiding. They imagined reaching for you and discovering that too much time had passed. They imagined hearing kindness in your voice but no longer hearing hope. They imagined you forgiving them without returning to them. That possibility brought tears they had not expected. Not because they believed you belonged to them. Their awakening is teaching them that love is not possession. The tears came because they realized they had been given something rare and had responded with hesitation. They saw how fear had made decisions in their name. They recognized that while they were trying to avoid pain, they may have created the very loss they feared. But listen closely, this message is not asking you to wait without boundaries. Heaven does not ask you to abandon your dignity in the name of connection. You are not being told to chase, convince, or rescue anyone. Your task is not to do their inner work for them. Your task is to remain honest with your own heart while refusing to shrink your worth. You can love someone and still require clarity. You can forgive someone and still observe whether their actions have changed. You can hear an apology and still take time before opening the same door. Divine love does not demand that you betray yourself. This is important because the words they want to say may touch the part of you that has longed for confirmation. You may feel relief. You may feel anger. You may feel tenderness and caution at the same time. All of these emotions can exist together. Do not judge yourself for the complexity of your response. The heart is not a machine that instantly returns to trust because it finally receives the words it once needed. Something huge is waiting beneath this confession, and it concerns not only the past but a decision about the future. Your soulmate has begun imagining what it would mean to stop speaking in possibilities and begin speaking in intentions. They have asked themselves whether they are ready to offer more than emotion. They know that saying, "I love you," without changing the patterns that hurt you would only reopen the wound. They know they cannot return with beautiful words and disappear again when vulnerability becomes uncomfortable. So they are considering a step they once avoided. This step may involve contacting you directly, revealing the full reason behind their distance, admitting what another person said or did, or correcting a misunderstanding that influenced their choices. There is a piece of the story you still do not know. It is not necessarily a betrayal, but it is something that shaped their silence. They heard information, accepted an assumption, or allowed someone else's fear to affect the way they saw the connection. For a while, they believed they were protecting themselves. Now they suspect they may have been protecting a misunderstanding. This is where the story becomes deeper. Someone around them may have expressed doubt about you. The doubt was not always based on truth. It may have come from jealousy, projection, protectiveness, or a limited understanding of what existed between you. Your soulmate listened because the warning touched their existing fears. Instead of asking you directly, they stepped back and observed from a distance. They interpreted ordinary events through a fearful lens. But time began exposing the weakness in that story. The things they were told did not match the person they had known in private. Your actions did not align with the version of you they had been encouraged to fear. Even during distance, you did not behave in the cruel or manipulative way they had been warned you might. You may have been hurt, but you retained your dignity. You may have withdrawn, but you did not seek revenge. You may have stopped reaching out, but you did not destroy what had once been meaningful. Your silence revealed your character more clearly than their assumptions did. Now they are questioning everything. They are asking why they allowed another voice to become louder than their own experience. They are wondering whether pride prevented them from admitting they had judged too quickly. They are beginning to see that the connection did not fail because nothing real existed. It became wounded because fear, outside influence, and unspoken expectations were allowed to occupy the space where honest conversation should have lived. This realization is painful, but it is necessary. Transformation often begins when the old explanation can no longer survive. Your soulmate wants you to hear this before it feels too late to say it. You were never as easy to forget as they pretended. Your absence did not bring the freedom they expected. It brought clarity. Without your presence, they discovered how much light you had quietly carried into their world. They noticed the difference between being surrounded and being understood. They noticed how many conversations remained on the surface. They noticed that laughter could fill a room without reaching the lonely place inside them. They began to understand your value through the shape of the emptiness you left behind. But even now, they are hesitating over one final truth. It is the truth that could change the direction of this entire connection. They have not shared it with the person who confronted them. They have barely admitted it to themselves. It concerns a promise they made privately, perhaps during the period when they were trying to move on. They told themselves that if a certain sign appeared, if a certain circumstance changed, or if they felt your presence returned strongly enough, they would stop hiding and speak. Recently, something happened that they have interpreted as that sign. It may have been a dream so vivid they woke with tears in their eyes. It may have been hearing words you once said repeated by a stranger. It may have been finding an old message at the exact moment they were preparing to erase the past. It may have been a sudden inner certainty that arrived without logic, speak now, or live with the question forever. Since then, their heart has not allowed them to return to numbness. They have begun forming the message. The first line is still changing, but the ending remains the same. They want to ask whether there is still space for one honest conversation. Not a promise. Not a demand. Not an attempt to pressure you into returning to the past. One conversation in which neither of you hides behind pride. One conversation where they can tell you what truly happened, what they believed, what they feared, and why they stayed silent even when every part of them wanted to reach for you. They know you may say no. That is part of what makes this moment real. For the first time, they are considering speaking without controlling your response. They are learning that courage is not certainty of acceptance. Courage is telling the truth because the truth deserves to exist, even when the outcome cannot be guaranteed. And you, beloved child, are being prepared to hear without abandoning your discernment. Do not allow longing to make every word seem like proof. Listen for responsibility. Listen for consistency. Listen for whether they speak only about their pain or whether they also understand yours. Listen for whether they blame circumstances or acknowledge their choices. The sincerity of their message will not be measured by how emotional it sounds, but by whether it creates a different pattern afterward. Words may open the door, but actions must decide whether it remains open. There is a reason your spirit has been restless recently. The energy of an unfinished truth is moving closer to expression. You may notice more reminders, dreams, emotional waves, or sudden moments of clarity. Do not become consumed by signs. Let them return you to your own center. The purpose of this revelation is not to make you anxious. It is to remind you that clarity is approaching and that you do not need to force it. What belongs in the light will eventually step out of hiding. Yet before that happens, there is one more obstacle inside your soulmate. It is not another person. It is not distance. It is not timing. It is shame. They are ashamed that it took loss for them to understand what presence could not teach them. They are ashamed of how long they allowed you to question your value. They are ashamed that they may now appear only because they fear you are moving on. They worry you will believe their confession is selfish, delayed, or motivated by loneliness. And part of them knows you would have reason to wonder. That is why they are trying to decide how much truth to reveal at once. They could send a simple message and test your response. They could pretend the conversation is casual. They could hide behind nostalgia and avoid the deeper confession. But something within them keeps saying, "Do not return with another half-truth." This time, the words must be complete. They want to tell you that they loved you in ways they did not know how to express. They want to tell you they were frightened by how much your opinion mattered. They want to tell you they noticed every time you pulled back to protect yourself. They want to tell you that when you stopped reaching out, they checked for your presence more often than before. They want to tell you that they secretly hoped you would break the silence, even though they knew it was unfair to place the burden on you. They want to tell you they nearly contacted you on a night when everything inside them felt unbearable. But something stopped them. And the reason is not what you think. That night, they had written more than a few sentences. They had written the most honest message they had ever prepared for you. They admitted the misunderstanding. They described the moment they realized they had been wrong. They confessed that they had tried to replace the connection with distractions and failed. They even wrote the question they had been too afraid to ask: "Did I lose you because I waited too long?" Their finger hovered over the final button. Then a message arrived from someone else. It contained information about you. Your soulmate read it once, then again. Their entire body became still. The message appeared to confirm their greatest fear, but one detail did not make sense. Instead of sending their confession, they closed it. They told themselves they needed to investigate before speaking. Since that night, they have been trying to discover whether what they received was true, exaggerated, or deliberately misleading. And now they have found something. A contradiction. A detail that changes the meaning of everything they were told. They are beginning to realize that the message may not have been sent to protect them. It may have been sent to prevent them from reaching you. The truth behind that interference is closer than either of you knows, and the person responsible has no idea that your soulmate has finally discovered the first piece of evidence. But what they found was not only a lie about you. It was proof that someone knew about the confession before it was ever sent.